Welcome everyone. This is the account with the report for day 446 of the war in Ukraine. Thank you for tuning in. Today I have one extra news segment regarding President Zelensky's visit to France and the UK. All other updates are grouped into the usual situation inside Ukraine, the occupied territories, Russia and Belarus, and the international developments. Before we start the news though, the flashpoints along the front. Bakhmut. The fighting is taking place on the eastern edge of the Berchivske reservoir, and the occupiers have carried out several local counterattacks in order to stop the Ukrainian advance. In the Ivanivske direction, the Ukrainians have captured positions on the heights above Klishchivka and pushed the Russians from the Donbas Canal around Stupochki, and are trying to advance further towards Klishchivka from Ivanivske and from the canal. They are also continuing to push across the canal in the direction of Kurdyumivka. Inside Bakhmut, the Russians managed to capture another area in the city, dividing the previously unified zone controlled by the Ukrainians in half. They also conquered the industrial college. It is likely that we are witnessing one of the last days of the defense of the remnants of Bakhmut. Vuhledar. It seems Ukrainian troops are making limited progress towards Pavlivka after they managed to reach the southern bank of the Kashlahach River. And to start the news segment, the updates on President Zelensky's visit to France and the United Kingdom. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has met with his French counterpart Emmanuel Macron in Paris. Both parties discussed practical cooperation to strengthen the capacity of Ukraine's defense forces to launch an effective counteroffensive and liberate the occupied territories. Zelensky thanked Macron for his leadership and expressed hope that France would support the principal joint decision of the Allies to form a coalition of fighter jets, which Ukraine has been looking forward to for a long time. The leaders also signed a joint declaration reiterating their unequivocal condemnation of Russia's ongoing war of aggression against Ukraine. France will continue to provide political, financial, humanitarian, and military support to Ukraine for as long as necessary, both individually and through international cooperation with the EU, NATO, UN, and other formats. France also announced they will train and equip several Ukrainian battalions with dozens of armored vehicles and light tanks, including AMX-10RC. French President Emmanuel Macron has said after a meeting with President Volodymyr Zelensky that he had opened the door to training pilots from Ukraine without specifying any details. After his visit to France, President Volodymyr Zelensky traveled on to the United Kingdom. Zelensky later arrived at Chequers, the Prime Minister's country residence in Buckinghamshire, as part of his surprise visit to the United Kingdom. Both leaders said that they continue to work for Ukraine's victory. Prime Minister Rishi Sunak announced that the UK would develop a new training program for Ukrainian pilots. This will be done to support Ukraine's efforts to create a new Ukrainian Air Force equipped with F-16 fighters that meet NATO standards. The United Kingdom will also provide Ukraine with hundreds of attack drones that have a range of over 200 kilometers. At a joint press conference with UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, President Zelensky said he is satisfied with the achievements and agreements reached during his tour of Europe. A look at all the minor updates out of Ukraine. The Economic Security Bureau of Ukraine, together with the Security Service of Ukraine, exposed a large-scale scheme of theft of gas from the gas transportation system of Ukraine. ISW and SSU informed Dmytro Firtash and the top management of his companies about the suspicion. They have been served with notices. The spokesman for the Air Force Command of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Yuri Ihnat, expressed his hope that Ukraine will receive sufficient quantities of the Storm Shadow cruise missiles. Ukraine Supreme Court Chairman Vsevolod Knyaziev was detained after being caught receiving a bribe of about $3 million, Ukrainian media outlet Ukrainska Pravda reported, citing sources in law enforcement. Next up, the latest regarding the situation in the occupied territories. For a third time, explosions were reported in the city of Luhansk. The former ambassador of the LPR in Moscow, Rodion Miroshnik, reported the explosions took place near the bus station, while eyewitnesses stated that the explosions took place on the premises of the Luhansk Higher Military Aviation School for Navigators. A strong fire was reported after the explosions. Another explosion was reported later today. According to preliminary data, a grenade exploded inside a barber shop. During the explosion in the barber shop, the acting minister of the Interior of the Luhansk People's Republic, Igor Kornet, was severely wounded and is currently in intensive care. According to an Ukrainska Pravda informant in law enforcement, the security service of Ukraine is behind the explosion in the barber shop that injured Kornet. Petro Andriuschenko, advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, reported explosions in occupied Tokmak. The Kremlin-aligned TASS news outlet confirmed the report. Andriy Chernyak, a representative of the Defense Intelligence of Ukraine, told RBC Ukraine in a commentary that the Ukrainian intelligence has not seen any withdrawal of Russian troops from the temporarily occupied districts of the Kherson and Zaporizhia oblasts. Russia actually has concentrated 152,000 personnel there and are preparing for defense. According to the National Resistance Center, collaborators are fleeing en masse to the Russian Federation from the temporarily occupied territories of Zaporizhia and Kherson oblasts. Petro Andriuschenko, advisor to the mayor of Mariupol, shared pictures on social media on how Russian occupation authorities are preparing to defend the temporarily occupied city. They have set up fortifications near every bridge over the Kalchik and Kalmius rivers in the city and neighboring villages. Moving on to the news updates from Russia and Belarus. Portugal is considering granting citizenship to two Russian oligarchs linked to Vladimir Putin, Alexander Smuzikov and Alexander Kaplan. This process began in 2020. The Vashnie Istorie outlet, citing sources inside the Kremlin, reports that officials of various levels have been informally forbidden to resign because it is necessary to demonstrate unity, and the decision to resign is regarded as treason and threatened with criminal proceedings. Leaked US intelligence documents suggest that Yevgeny Prigozhin, head of the Wagner PMC, offered to give Russian troop locations to Ukraine in exchange for Ukrainian forces withdrawing from the area around Bakhmut. Prigozhin allegedly made the offer in an effort to prevent rising casualty rates among Wagner troops in Bakhmut, which has been the epicenter of fighting between Ukrainian and Russian forces for the past 9 months. Two Ukrainian officials confirmed to Washington Post on the condition of anonymity that Prigozhin has been in contact several times with Ukraine's intelligence directorate. However, Ukraine rejected Prigozhin's offer more than once because officials don't trust Prigozhin and thought his proposals could have been disingenuous. The spokesman of the President of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Peskov, called the report about Prigozhin a fake. Russian President Vladimir Putin has signed a decree that allows foreign citizens who sign contracts for military service in the Russian armed forces during the period of the so-called special military operation to obtain Russian citizenship in a simplified way. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, who is said to be unwell, appeared in public for the first time since May 9th. It was quickly pointed out that he has a hoarse voice, bandaged hand, and in one photograph looks like a wax figure, further fueling speculations about his health. The monitoring project Belarusian Hajun reported an echelon with Russian military equipment being transferred from Belarus to Luhansk Oblast. And to wrap up the news segment, the international developments. Li Hui, Chinese special representative, will visit Ukraine on May 16th to 17th to discuss the political settlement of the war. The G7 countries are preparing stricter sanctions against Russian exports as well as its energy sector. The Armed Forces of Norway, Forsvaret, plan to train about 3,200 Ukrainian soldiers this year, the General Staff of Ukraine reported. Ukrainian intelligence reports that its officers will receive 105 Vector unmanned aerial vehicles under a contract between the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense and the German UAV manufacturer Quantum Systems GmbH. NATO will not issue a formal invitation for Ukraine to join the alliance at the upcoming Vilnius summit in July. Baltic nations and the Czech Republic support concrete steps defining the path to membership ahead of the summit. These countries argue that Ukraine has endured enough suffering to earn its place and hesitation would only empower Russia. France, Germany and the US prefer a slower, more cautious approach. Some of the arguments against the rapid ascension include prioritizing battlefield support. The Project Gift for Putin in the Czech Republic announced that it collected $2.3 million in donations for the purchase of an RM-70 MLRS and ammunition for Ukraine. The Minister of National Defense of Poland has announced the arrival of the first HIMARS systems in the country. Hungary has once again blocked the payment of a €500 million aid package from the European Peace Fund for weapons that EU member states are supplying to Ukraine. The Biden administration is preparing a proposal for a new round of funding for defense aid for Ukraine as the $48 billion Ukraine aid package that Congress approved in December is expected to dry up in the next few months. And now for the intelligence report segment, starting with the UK Ministry of Defense. On May 3, 2023, several uncrewed aerial vehicles, UAVs, struck Russia's Sestcha airbase 150 kilometers north of the Ukrainian border. One AN-124 heavy transport aircraft of Russia's Military Transport Aviation, VTA, was likely damaged. Sestcha is a hub for the VTA in western Russia and has played a major role in enabling Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russia also uses the site to launch Iranian-produced one-way attack UAVs towards Kyiv. The VTA is a well-resourced element of the Russian Air Force, essential for transport across the vast country. Russian leaders will be concerned that Russia's air defenses continue to be compromised, holding at risk key strategic assets such as VTA bases. A look at the latest assessment by the Institute for the Study of War. Russian forces conducted another series of drone and missile strikes against Ukraine on the night of May 13th to 14th. Increasingly regular series of Russian drone and missile strikes are likely a part of a new Russian air campaign in Ukraine aimed at degrading Ukrainian abilities to conduct offensive operations in the near term. Ukrainian forces continued counterattacking around Bakhmut on May 14th. The Russian Ministry of Defense, MOD, is attempting to distract from recent Ukrainian successes near Bakhmut by praising Russian defensive efforts against the Ukrainian counterattacks. Former Russian officer and ardent nationalist Igor Girkin's newly formed Club of Angry Patriots is continuing efforts to expand its presence and influence public discourse. And to wrap up the report, the evening update by the General Staff of Ukraine. The enemy continues to focus its main efforts on the Liman, Bakhmut, Avdiivka and Marinka directions. 37 combat clashes took place. Bakhmut and Marinka continue to be at the epicenter of hostilities. In the Kupiansk direction, the enemy does not stop trying to improve the tactical position. During this period, the enemy conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the Mariupol area. In the Bakhmut direction, the enemy continues to conduct offensive actions. Heavy fighting continues for Bakhmut. In addition, during the day, the enemy conducted unsuccessful offensive actions in the direction of the settlement of Ivanivske. In the Marinka direction, units of the defense forces repelled numerous enemy attacks in the area of the city of Marinka. Recently, in the temporarily captured territory of the Zaporizhia Oblast, persons who agreed to cooperate with the Russian occupiers were asked to record in writing the renunciation of Ukrainian citizenship and to accept Russian citizenship. Those who refuse are threatened by the invaders with dismissal from their jobs and further persecution. In order to strengthen control over the population in the temporarily occupied Crimea, operative groups of the Ministry of Internal Affairs and the FSB of the Russian Federation conduct raids on railway stations and bus stations. First of all, the Crimean Tatars are subject to inspection. And that concludes today's report. Should you be interested in any article I mentioned, you can find links to them in the description as usual. If you enjoyed the report and found it informative, please consider sharing it with others and giving me a like. Thank you for tuning in and have a great day. You were listening to The Account. Slava Ukraini.